The first time Camilla Ashworth heard Gabriel's name spoken as a death sentence, it was not whispered in a drawing room. It was shouted on the river. Night had fallen over Savannah, and the Savannah River looked like black glass broken by moonlight. Lanterns swung from the dock posts, their reflections trembling on the water, as if the river itself were afraid to hold still. A crowd had gathered where the air reeked of tar, wet rope, and hot anger. Gabriel stood on the edge of the wharf with his hands bound behind him, a coil of line biting into his wrist so tight the skin bulged around it. Someone had torn his shirt open at the collar. He was bleeding at the mouth, not from the river, but from men. Camilla pushed through the bodies, hair loose, dress soaked to the knees, breath coming in frantic, humiliating gasps. She looked nothing like the widow they paraded at church, nothing like the graceful young mistress who once drifted through her own life as if it were a novel. She looked like a woman who had finally awakened and discovered the world would punish her for it. "Please," she said, voice breaking as she reached the front. "He saved me. He saved my life." Richard Pemberton's laugh cut through the night like a blade. He stood beside the sheriff with a calm, satisfied expression, as if watching a business ledger balance itself. "He saved you once," Richard said. "Now he will sink for you." Two men dragged Gabriel closer to the edge. The water below lapped softly against the pilings, patient and hungry. Gabriel lifted his head, found Camilla's eyes, and in the lantern glow she saw something that shattered her. Not terror, not begging, but a quiet apology, as if he regretted only that he could not protect her from what was coming next. Camilla stepped forward. The sheriff raised a hand to stop her, and the river waited. "Before we continue, let me ask you, where are you listening from today? Whether you're at home or on the road, I wish you a warm and joyful Christmas. Now, let's get back to the story." Savannah, in the summer of 1836, was a city that breathed through water and sweat. The Savannah River moved slowly past its banks, thick and brown, carrying ships heavy with cotton toward the Atlantic. From dawn until nightfall, the air clung to the skin like a second, damp garment. Cicadas screamed from the oaks draped in Spanish moss, and the smell of salt, mud, and human labor never truly faded. Wealth rose here on silent suffering, and the city wore its elegance the way a sinner wears perfume. The Ashworth mansion stood close to the river, its white facade catching the sun, its wide verandas promising shade and refinement. Inside, the floors gleamed, the curtains were imported, and grief was expected to be quiet. Camilla Grace Ashworth had learned that lesson well. At 22, she was already a widow, dressed in soft mourning colors that flattered her pale skin and made society sigh with sympathetic approval. Her marriage to Edmund Ashworth had been brief and dutiful. He had been kind in the distant way men were kind to property they wished to preserve. When malaria took him, Savannah spoke of tragedy. Camilla spoke of nothing at all. Left alone with wealth she had never wanted to earn and responsibility she had never been taught to carry, Camilla retreated inward. She lived among books filled with longing and piano melodies, written by men who had mistaken despair for romance. Love, in her imagination, was supposed to hurt beautifully, to be overwhelming, to arrive like fate and consume everything in its path. Reality disappointed her. She left the plantation management to the overseer. She signed papers without reading them. She walked past enslaved people without looking at their faces, not out of cruelty, but because acknowledging them would fracture the illusion that her life was untouched by ugliness. Camilla believed herself fragile, sensitive, too refined for the brutal mechanics of the world she benefited from. In truth, she was simply asleep. Gabriel lived fully awake. He had been born on Ashworth land, delivered by hands that did not belong to his mother by law, and claimed the moment he first drew breath. His mother, Ruth, had once served a Quaker family near Philadelphia before being sold south. From them, she had learned letters, numbers, scripture. From her, Gabriel learned them in secret, late at night, tracing words into dirt, and memorizing them before dawn erased the evidence. Georgia law forbade enslaved people to read. Punishment ranged from whipping to sail farther south. Gabriel understood risk early. He also understood restraint. At 25, he was tall and powerfully built, his body shaped by labor in the fields and along the docks. But it was his eyes that marked him. They were observant, calm, and guarded. The eyes of a man who had learned that survival depended on seeing everything while revealing nothing. Gabriel spoke little. When spoken to, he answered politely. When ordered, he obeyed. He became useful in many places because usefulness sometimes protected a man from the worst abuses. He worked with horses, repaired fences, loaded cargo, and when needed, served inside the house. That was where he saw Camilla. Not often, not closely, but enough. He noticed how she sat by the river-facing windows for hours, a book resting open but unread. He noticed how her music carried sorrow rather than joy, how the notes lingered as if reluctant to end. He noticed that she never laughed, not really, only smiled when expected. Gabriel did not romanticize her. He had seen white women cry before, had watched them retreat into silks and room while others bled to maintain that comfort. He knew the distance between them was enforced by violence older than either of them, and yet there was a hollowness about Camilla that unsettled him, not entitlement, not cruelty, emptiness. When he was assigned to work near the house, he found himself paying attention in ways he did not intend. He placed wildflowers on a windowsill where she often sat, choosing ones that thrived despite poor soil. He returned books to the library shelves in a different order, leaving volumes of travel and philosophy nearer her reach. Once, he adjusted the piano bench without thinking, remembering how she shifted uncomfortably during longer pieces. Camilla never asked who did these things. She assumed they were part of the house, like the breeze that drifted in from the river. In the evenings, Gabriel sometimes stood at the edge of the yard and watched the water darken under the setting sun. He understood rivers. He had learned early how they could give life and take it, how they pretended calm until they didn't. Camilla, he thought, did not understand that yet. She thought danger arrived with drama, like in her novels. She did not know how quietly it truly came. Their worlds remained separate, balanced precariously on silence and habit. Until the river, indifferent to class and illusion alike, decided to pull them together. The heat broke nothing. It only sharpened it. By mid-July, Savannah felt submerged rather than scorched, as if the city had sunk into its own river and was breathing through cloth. Even the riverboats moved sluggishly, their paddles churning the water with tired persistence. On such days, Camilla Ashworth could not bear the confines of her house. The walls pressed too close, the curtains trapped air instead of cooling it, and her thoughts circled endlessly in the same small, aching loops. That morning, she made a decision that felt harmless. She ordered a small skiff readied at the private landing behind the house. No servants were summoned, no companion invited. She wanted silence, the illusion of control, the fantasy of drifting the way heroines in her books drifted toward revelation. She brought only a thin parasol and a novel whose pages were already creased at the passages she loved most. The river welcomed her gently at first. Camilla dipped the oars without rhythm, letting the current do most of the work. The banks slid past in shades of green and brown, Spanish moss swaying like tired dancers. She read as the skiff rocked, half aware of time, half adrift inside a story that promised meaning through suffering. What she did not notice was how the current thickened. The Savannah River curved deceptively here, narrowing before widening again. Beneath the surface, the pull intensified, feeding into a stretch of turbulent water locals avoided without thinking. To those who knew the river, the warning signs were obvious. The sound deepening, the water's surface tightening, the way debris began to race instead of drift. Camilla knew none of this. She felt it only when the skiff lurched. Her parasol slipped from her lap, snapping shut as it struck the boards. The book slid, pages fluttering wildly, then dropped into the water. Camilla gasped and reached for it, shifting her weight at exactly the wrong moment. The skiff spun. She grabbed for the oars, heart pounding now, confusion replacing daydreams. The sound reached her then, the low, growing roar ahead, not loud, but relentless. "Hello?" she called, absurdly, as if the river might answer. On the docks downstream, Gabriel was unloading cargo when he saw her. At first, he recognized only the skiff, then the angle, then the speed. His body reacted before his mind finished the thought. "Miss Ashworth," he shouted, dropping the crate. "Row to shore. There's rough water ahead." The wind carried his voice away. Camilla did not hear him. Gabriel ran along the bank, boots slipping in mud, shouting again, louder this time. He waved his arms, pointing frantically. A few dock workers turned to look, then followed his gaze. Too late. The skiff hit the faster current and tipped sharply. Camilla screamed as the oar was torn from her hands. The boat bucked once, twice, and flipped. Cold swallowed her. The river did not feel like water. It felt like weight, like hands pulling her down, tangling her skirts, stealing her breath. She surfaced once, coughing, mouth filling with brown water, then sank again as panic took hold. Gabriel did not stop running. He tore off his shirt as he reached the edge and dove without hesitation. The river slammed into him, stronger than it looked, dragging at his limbs, forcing him under before he could orient himself. He surfaced, gasping, eyes searching wildly. He saw her then. Camilla's arm broke the surface for a second, fingers clawing at nothing. Gabriel swam hard, fighting the current rather than yielding to it. His muscles burned. The water slammed against his chest, his legs, his ribs. He reached her just as she slipped under again. He grabbed her arm and pulled, wrapping one arm around her shoulders, forcing her face above water. She thrashed weakly, terror-stricken, and he tightened his grip, speaking low and firm near her ear. "Be still. I've got you." He turned them sideways to the current, kicking toward the bank inch by brutal inch. The river fought him, relentless, but Gabriel did not let go. His lungs screamed, his vision blurred. He focused on one thing only, the solid feel of her body in his arms, the proof that she was still alive. When his feet finally struck mud, he nearly collapsed. He dragged her onto the bank and rolled her onto her side, coughing water himself as she lay motionless. For a moment, one endless, hollow moment, he thought he had failed. Then Camilla coughed. Her body convulsed as water spilled from her lungs. She gasped, eyes fluttering open, and stared at the sky as if seeing it for the first time. Gabriel fell back beside her, chest heaving, river water streaming from his hair and skin. When Camilla turned her head, her gaze landed on him, on the man soaked and shaking beside her, on the man who had pulled her back from death with nothing but his strength and his will. "Who?" she whispered. "My name is Gabriel," he said, still fighting for breath. "I work for you." She stared at him, the roar of the river still in her ears, and understood something with terrifying clarity. Everything she believed about danger, love, and life itself had been wrong. And the river had corrected her. Camilla did not sleep that night. The river stayed with her long after she was dry and wrapped in linen, long after the house settled into its familiar hush. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the pull again, the sudden violence beneath the calm surface, the helplessness, the certainty of death. And always, cutting through that terror, was the memory of Gabriel's arms around her, unyielding, sure, refusing to let the river decide. At dawn, she rose and went to the window overlooking the water. The Savannah River looked the same as it always had, broad, slow, deceptively peaceful. It infuriated her. She realized, with a jolt of shame, that this was how she had lived her entire life, trusting surfaces, never questioning what moved underneath. Gabriel did not come to the house for several days. Camilla asked after him once, carefully, as if the question itself might betray her. The overseer said Gabriel had been reassigned to heavier work near the docks. Camilla nodded, accepting the explanation she was given, yet unease coiled in her chest. The absence felt louder than presence ever had. When she finally saw him again, it was by chance. She was walking the garden paths in the late afternoon, trying unsuccessfully to read, when she heard voices near the outer wall. Gabriel was there, lifting sacks of grain with another man. His movements were slower than before. When he turned, she saw the bruise darkening along his ribs, the raw scrape on his forearm. She stopped. Gabriel noticed her at the same moment and froze, the sack still balanced on his shoulder. For an instant, neither of them moved. Then he lowered the sack carefully and inclined his head, the old habits reasserting themselves like armor. "Miss Ashworth." Her throat tightened. "You were hurt." He followed her gaze and shrugged. "The river isn't gentle." "I mean after," she said quietly. "You were sent back to work immediately." "Yes, miss." The word miss felt wrong now, smaller than what lay between them. "I owe you my life," Camilla said. "That deserves more than silence." Gabriel hesitated. Eyes were everywhere on a plantation, even when they appeared not to be. He glanced toward the wall, then back at her. "I did what anyone should," he replied. She shook her head. "No, you did what only someone willing to risk everything would do." Something shifted in his expression then, not pride, but a guarded sorrow. "Risk is not a choice for some of us," he said gently. Camilla absorbed that in silence. That evening she sent for him, not to the parlor, not to the music room, to the library, a space rarely used, quiet, lined with knowledge that had always felt ornamental rather than alive. When Gabriel entered, he did so cautiously, standing near the door as if ready to retreat at the first sign of danger. "Sit," Camilla said, gesturing to a chair across from her. He did not move. "This is not an order," she added, aware of how thin the distinction sounded. "It is an invitation." Gabriel studied her for a long moment, then sat. The silence stretched, heavy and expectant. "I don't know how to speak to you," Camilla admitted. "Not properly. Everything I've been taught feels false." Gabriel kept his hands folded, his posture controlled. "You can speak as you wish, miss." "No," she said, "as a person." That word, person, hung between them, dangerous and fragile. She rose and went to the shelves, running her fingers along spines she had never truly read. "You saved me," she said again, this time without ceremony. "And I realized afterward that I didn't know the name of the man who did it. I didn't know anything about him." "You know now," Gabriel replied. "I want to know more," she said, "if you're willing." This was the moment Gabriel had learned to fear. Knowledge invited attachment, attachment invited scrutiny, and scrutiny, in this world, killed. "What would you like to know?" he asked carefully. "Who you are," she said, "not what you do." Gabriel breathed in slowly. "I am the son of Ruth," he said. "She taught me letters before she died. She told me the world was larger than what I could see, even if I never got to touch it." Camilla's eyes widened. "You can read?" "Yes, miss." The law loomed unspoken between them. She closed the distance to the shelf and selected a slim volume, travel essays, observations of distant lands. She held it out to him. "Tell me what you see," she said. Gabriel took the book as if it were a living thing, dangerous and precious. He opened it, eyes scanning the page, lips parting slightly as he read. When he looked up, something in his expression had softened. "This man writes about freedom," Gabriel said, "but he does not understand it. He thinks it's movement, not fearlessness." Camilla sat opposite him, transfixed. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Not her husband, not her suitors, not her cousins with their polished opinions. "You're right," she whispered. From that day on, the library became their refuge. They met there in the late afternoons, when the house grew quiet and the heat pressed even the servants into stillness. They spoke of books at first, what they said, what they avoided, what truths they brushed against without daring to name. Camilla began choosing volumes not for romance, but for ideas. History, philosophy, accounts of places where slavery had been challenged, even if only briefly. Gabriel read hungrily, cautiously, as though every sentence were a stolen gift. They spoke of faith. "I was taught God rewards obedience," Camilla said one evening, staring at the window where twilight gathered. "But obedience never brought me peace." "My mother said God listens," Gabriel replied. "But people decide who gets to speak." They spoke of loneliness. Camilla confessed the hollowness of her marriage, the suffocating expectations of widowhood, the way grief had become an identity she was expected to perform. Gabriel spoke of watching people he loved disappear south, of learning not to ask where they went. Their bond did not grow quickly. It deepened. There were nights when Camilla lay awake, replaying their conversations, ashamed of how alive she felt afterward. There were mornings when Gabriel forced himself to focus on labor, to remind his body that survival depended on discipline. The first touch was accidental and devastating. Camilla reached for a book at the same moment Gabriel did. Their fingers brushed. It was nothing. It was everything. She pulled back as if burned. Gabriel closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I," he answered. They began to fear the silence more than the words. One night, during a summer storm, thunder rattled the windows and rain lashed the house with sudden violence. Camilla had insisted Gabriel stay until it passed. The candle between them flickered wildly. "I used to think love was supposed to be tragic," she said softly. "Something that hurt beautifully." "And now?" Gabriel asked. "And now I think it's supposed to be honest," she replied. "And terrifying." The air seemed to tighten. "This is dangerous," Gabriel said. "For you. For me." "I know," Camilla whispered. "Then we must stop." She nodded. "Yes." They did not stop. Instead, they learned the language of restraint, how close they could sit without touching, how long a look could last without betraying them, how to step away when footsteps approached, how to hide truth behind ordinary words. They never kissed. That was the rule Gabriel insisted on, the last boundary he clung to as protection. "If we cross that line," he said one night, voice low, "there will be no pretending this is anything else." Camilla respected that boundary, even as it tore at her. Love, she discovered, did not need touch to burn. It lived in shared silence, in trust, in the knowledge that someone saw her not as a role to be played, but as a woman waking from a long sleep. By the time autumn crept into Savannah, softening the heat but sharpening tempers, they were already in too deep. And the world, patient and cruel, had begun to notice. Autumn did not cool Savannah so much as it exposed it. The heat retreated just enough for tempers to surface. Voices carried farther. Footsteps sounded sharper on brick and wood. And in the Ashworth household, watchfulness settled in like a second set of eyes. Richard Pemberton arrived on a morning heavy with river fog. He came with a smile polished by Charleston drawing rooms and a manner that suggested concern rather than hunger. He kissed Camilla's gloved hand, lingered a fraction too long, and spoke warmly of family duty and protection. The house, long adrift without a master, seemed to lean toward him as if grateful for a firm voice. Camilla felt the opposite. From the moment Richard crossed the threshold, the library became dangerous. The garden paths felt exposed. Every shared glance with Gabriel tightened her chest with fear. She found herself counting steps, measuring time, listening for the scrape of boots that would signal discovery. Richard noticed everything. He noticed Camilla's distraction at dinner, the way her attention drifted toward windows and doors. He noticed that the library, once a decorative afterthought, now bore signs of use, books left open, chairs moved, dust disturbed, and he noticed Gabriel, whose presence near the house had become frequent enough to register. "Who is that?" Richard asked one afternoon, nodding toward Gabriel as he crossed the yard. "A man who works here," Camilla replied, keeping her voice steady. Richard smiled. "They all do." The overseer, sensing the shift in power, began to circle. Questions were asked casually, then less so. Why was Gabriel being called inside so often? Why did the mistress require books fetched rather than sent by a maid? Why did Gabriel return to the docks later than expected? Gabriel felt the net tightening. He began avoiding the library, inventing reasons to stay away, forcing himself back into invisibility. Camilla noticed immediately. "You're pulling away," she said one evening when they met briefly by the garden wall, shadows long and treacherous. "They're watching," he replied. "You mustn't be seen with me." "I can't pretend nothing has changed," she whispered. "You must," Gabriel said, pain cutting through his restraint. "Because if they decide to see this the way they want to see it, there will be no mercy." Mercy vanished 3 nights later. Richard drank heavily that evening, his voice loud, his laughter sharp. He dismissed the servants early, claiming a headache, then wandered the house with the unearned authority of a man who expected compliance. Camilla was in the library, alone, trying to read without seeing the words. She did not hear Richard approach until he was already inside. "So, this is where you've been hiding," he said lightly. Her heart slammed. "I wasn't hiding." "No," he agreed. "You were thinking." He moved closer, eyes scanning the room. "Funny thing, Camilla. I've been here a week, and I've seen more of your slave than I have of you." Her mouth went dry. "Gabriel?" "Ah," Richard said softly. "So he does have a name." Camilla stood. "Leave this room." Richard laughed. "You're in no position to give orders." His gaze sharpened. "Do you know what people are saying?" "I don't care," she said, though fear crept into her voice. "You will," he replied. "Because if this becomes public, if anyone believes you've been compromised, your fortune becomes vulnerable, and so do you." That night, Richard followed. He waited, he watched. And when Gabriel slipped into the library at Camilla's request, one last conversation, she had insisted, one last attempt at normalcy, Richard stood in the hallway and listened. He did not hear a confession. He did not need one. The sight of them standing close, the sound of Camilla's voice, softened by trust, was enough. The next morning, Gabriel was seized at the docks. The charge was spoken with practiced disgust: improper conduct toward a white woman, insolence, presumption. Under Georgia law, accusation was often all that was required. Camilla ran to the holding room by the river, skirts lifted, breath tearing at her lungs. She found Gabriel behind bars, bruised, blood at his lip where a fist had landed hard enough to satisfy someone's anger. "This is my fault," she whispered through the iron. "No," Gabriel said firmly. "This is what the world was waiting to do." "They're saying you'll be punished," she sobbed. "They're saying—" "I know," he interrupted gently. The sheriff's voice drifted in from outside. The word hanging was spoken without ceremony, as if discussing weather. Camilla turned and ran. She begged Richard. She offered money. She offered marriage. She offered silence and obedience, and anything else she could think to give. Richard smiled with genuine pleasure. "This is what happens when fantasies meet reality," he said. "You wanted a tragic love story. Now you have one." By evening, the gallows were being prepared on the wharf. The river moved on, indifferent, and Camilla understood, with a clarity that burned, that the world would drown Gabriel as easily as it had nearly drowned her, unless she chose to defy it completely. The night the gallows went up, Savannah did not pretend otherwise. Lanterns were lit along the wharf, their yellow light turning the river into a sheet of broken glass. Men gathered with the quiet efficiency of those accustomed to spectacle. The rope was tested, the platform checked. A drum rested nearby, its skin taut waiting. Gabriel was brought out just before midnight. His hands were bound. His shirt clung to him, stiff with blood and river damp. He walked without resistance, head high, eyes fixed not on the crowd but on the dark water beyond it. He knew rivers. He knew how quickly they decided a man's fate. Camilla arrived breathless, hair unpinned, shoes ruined with mud. She pushed through the gathering bodies, calling his name. The sheriff raised a hand. "Stay back, madam." "He saved my life," she cried. "You have no right." Richard Pemberton stepped into view, calm as ever. "You should go home, cousin. You've embarrassed yourself enough." Camilla's hands shook, but her voice did not. "If you do this, I will tell everyone what you are, what you've done, how you forced this." Richard leaned close, smiling. "Who will believe you? A hysterical widow defending a slave?" The drum sounded once. Gabriel turned then and saw her. For a moment, everything else fell away. He met her eyes and, against all sense, smiled. A small, steady thing meant to give her courage. That broke her. Camilla moved. She ran for the river's edge and threw herself between Gabriel and the platform, skirts tangling, breath tearing out of her chest. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Someone grabbed her arm. She tore free. "If he dies," she shouted, voice carrying across the water, "then I will tell the truth. I will publish it. I will ruin every man who stood here and watched." The sheriff hesitated. A flicker of uncertainty passed across the line of men holding Gabriel. Richard's expression hardened. "She's bluffing." Camilla reached into her bodice and pulled out folded papers, held high so the lantern light caught the ink. "These are deeds," she said. "Manumissions. Signed. Dated. I have witnesses in Philadelphia. Quakers who know my name. If he dies, this city will answer for it." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. Quakers. Philadelphia. North. The drum did not sound again. Richard stepped forward, voice sharp. "She lies." Camilla did not look at him. She looked at the sheriff. "Give him to me," she said, "or this becomes more than you can bury." The sheriff weighed the moment, the papers, the crowd, the threat of attention. He exhaled, slow and sour. "Untie him," he said. Shouts erupted. Richard lunged. Gabriel reacted on instinct. In one fluid motion, Gabriel wrenched free as the knot loosened, driving his shoulder into Richard's chest. They went down hard. The crowd surged. Someone drew a pistol. A shot cracked the night, splintering a dock post inches from Camilla's head. Gabriel grabbed Camilla's hand. "Now," he said. They ran. They plunged toward the skiff tied low beneath the wharf, ropes slick with river spray. Gabriel cut the line with a blade he'd hidden since the docks. Camilla stumbled into the boat. Another shot rang out. Water leapt beside them. Gabriel shoved off with everything he had. The current seized the skiff and spun it, yanking them into the dark. Lantern light fell away. Shouts dissolved into distance. The river swallowed sound and sense alike. Camilla clutched the gunwale, sobbing, laughter breaking through tears in a wild, disbelieving sound. Gabriel rowed until his arms screamed, then rowed more until the wharf was nothing but memory. They did not stop until dawn found them tangled in reeds, shaking, alive. Camilla pressed her forehead to Gabriel's chest, feeling his heart hammer. "I almost lost you," she whispered. "You didn't," he said. "You chose." She looked up at him, eyes clear for the first time since the river. "I choose you," she said. "Every consequence, every road." Gabriel cupped her face, reverent, restrained even now. "Then we leave," he said, "and we never look back." Behind them, Savannah woke to rumors and rage. Ahead lay a world that would not welcome them, but the river, once their judge, now carried them north. They followed the river until it loosened its grip. For days they moved by night and hid by day, guided by whispers and signs Camilla had never known to read before. Lanterns left unlit, doors cracked just enough, hands that passed bread without names. The world beyond Savannah was harsher than her books had promised, but it was honest. Each mile north stripped away another layer of illusion, replacing it with effort, fear, and choice. In Charleston, a Quaker woman burned Camilla's fine mourning dress in the hearth and pressed plain wool into her hands. "You'll be safer if no one remembers who you were," she said gently. Camilla nodded. She did not mourn the silk. Gabriel's freedom was not a moment, it was a process. Papers were signed, witnesses gathered. A fee paid that tasted like ransom. When the final seal was pressed, the room fell quiet, in a way Camilla would remember all her life. Gabriel stood very still. He had imagined freedom before, always as distance, away from chains, away from fields. He had not imagined the weight of it, the responsibility, the vulnerability. The way joy could arrive braided with grief for everyone who did not make it this far. Camilla took his hand without asking. They married in a small meeting house in Philadelphia. No music, no spectacle. Just truth spoken aloud and believed. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to their vows, and that indifference felt like mercy. Life did not become easy. It became real. Gabriel worked with wood, shaping doors and tables with a patience learned from years of watching rather than owning. Camilla taught piano and reading, her voice steady as she passed knowledge forward, no longer content to admire it from a distance. They were stared at, sometimes threatened, often ignored. They stayed anyway. When their daughter was born, they named her River Grace, not as a symbol of fate, but of memory. They would not allow the origin of their love to become myth. It had been fear, it had been violence, it had been choice. Years later, when the nation tore itself apart over the lie it had long protected, Camilla and Gabriel opened a small school near the river they had once fled. Children came barefoot and wary. Then I learned letters at long tables worn smooth by use. Camilla taught history without romance. Gabriel taught reading without fear. On quiet evenings, they walked the riverbank together. Camilla no longer pretended the water was gentle. She respected it. Gabriel did too. When Gabriel died, old and tired and free, Camilla held him and did not look away from the pain. She had learned that lesson at last. At his burial, she asked for no scripture carved in stone. Only words they both believed. He saved her from drowning in water. She saved him from drowning in chains. Together, they chose to live awake. The river moved on, as it always had. And so did the truth. The story is over, but the pain of that era still resonates. How are you feeling right now? Are you listening to this story alone or with someone? Share your feelings and where you are right now.